Hello, welcome to The Rationalist. Thanks for coming back if you're a returning viewer. I also want to thank people for leaving their comments. I'm getting more comments each week and some of them are very helpful. And this is supposed to be an interactive type of thing where we share ideas, so please keep sharing your feedback, your ideas with me. Today I want to talk about China, but before I do, a couple of comments. Last week was energy, and there were a number of people who said, hey, you forgot to talk about wind energy. Well, I did have wind turbine pictures to put in and all this stuff, and I skipped right over it. Mea culpa, my fault. Sorry about that. Second thing was on fuel cells. Excellent point. That fuel cells are not made today where we can put water in our gas tank and just use them as that, because it's the hydrogen that supplies the power and you have to use electrolysis to take the hydrogen out of the water, and that takes as much energy as it gives or maybe more. So that was meant more to be down the road. For today, it has to be hydrogen that we're using as a fuel cell, and it combines with oxygen from the atmosphere and puts water out your tailpipe. Either way, I still think fuel cells are the future. It's just a question of which type we use and what chemicals are in them. So again, thank you for those. Today I want to talk about China, which I think we need to view more and more as an enemy. People really don't, they kind of have maybe some bad feelings about China, but they don't really understand all that China is doing against us. And I think it's becoming critically important that we reevaluate our relationship with China and how we work with them. Now, they have one of the largest populations on Earth. Their economy is going gangbusters. It's growing like crazy. America is still, with 1/3 of their population, the largest economy in the world, the most productive by far. But they're going to catch us eventually, merely by the fact that they have so much population. But also because of their economic policies. And these are things we have to worry about. So before we discuss too much about America and China's relationship, let's just talk about a couple problems with China on its own that maybe don't affect us as much. So the first ones you think of course, are places like Hong Kong and Taiwan, where Hong Kong, where they keep taking their freedoms away and are trying to make the dictatorship over that area also. And then Taiwan, which they keep threatening to take by force. And very important, America has basically said, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to stand up for Taiwan and defend them. And that could get us into a military confrontation with Taiwan. I think the only reason that China hasn't done that so far is because we have military superiority. But our Navy, our admirals tell us that in about 10 years they think we won't have that option, that China will have the ability to defeat us in the South China Sea. And so that's something to worry about. But to start with, let's talk more about some of the things that we worry about with places that are dictatorships, that are not democracies. So let's start with the fact that China has over 1 million people in prison camps. And I'm not talking about your typical political prisoner. They have a lot of those too. But these people are in the far western regions of China and are Muslim, and they're in prison camps just because of their religion. Now we see that in some other places, but not to this extent. The other thing is they have no freedom, not only no freedom of religion, but no freedom of the press. And so you can't say anything bad about the government. If you do, you're thrown in jail. So these are kind of things that we know, and we see it in dictatorships around the world, but there's not a whole lot we can do about it, so we don't care too much. We certainly have reason to promote democracy around the world, and we want to continue to do that, but we have to be realistic on what we can and can't do. And by the way, when we talk about Hong Kong and Taiwan, I think we also need to throw into that Tibet. Tibet needs freedom from China too. So that's kind of a side note. On to the things that I worry about more. The first is, a number of years ago, 10, 12 years ago, there were competing claims in the South China Sea for who owned what economic zones, who owned what fishing zones, territory, etc. So the United Nations has a convention on the law of the seas, and they arbitrate these things. So all these places got together, and there's 7 different countries there that have claims. Yeah, so Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, a lot of them. And UN came back and said, China, you can't just take the whole China Sea. That's not yours. You have no history to it. This belongs to this country. This belongs to this country, etc. Well, what did China do? What they always do when they don't like something, they said, "Oh, we don't go by your ruling. We don't follow your jurisdictions. Forget it. It's all ours." So today, what happens is, like very recently, Vietnam had a fishing boat out fishing, and China came along and rammed it and sank it. And they try to keep other militaries out, and they try to keep other countries out of this enormous area. The South China Sea is a huge area and extends far southward in the claims of China from their territorial waters. But this is an example of how China operates. And since then, as you know, they've built up a lot of military facilities in the South China Sea, and it's getting to be kind of nasty over there, and it's going to get worse. America, Australia, some other countries, we do freedom of navigation through here. We take our Navy ships and we sail through the Taiwan Strait, and we sail through other areas of the South China Sea and say, no, sorry, we don't, you're wrong, the UN was right. But how long are we going to do that? And are we willing to risk a military confrontation with China, which is another superpower with nuclear weapons? It's kind of been an established ideology, if you will, that countries that have nuclear weapons don't go to war with each other. Obviously, it does happen, India and Pakistan, but generally speaking, it's a pretty darn good idea not to do that. So do you want to risk going to war directly with Russia, with China, when nuclear weapons could be used as a last resort? Pretty scary thing. So we worry about that. And the things in China that, they don't have freedom of press, they don't have freedom of religion, they don't have some important things that Americans take for granted, like Twitter and Facebook. You say, well, yeah, okay, that doesn't surprise me too much, but think about it from this point of view. We have Twitter and Facebook here, and you can pretty much, within reason, write anything you want on them. In China, you can't, so they don't have Twitter or Facebook because we're not willing to, those companies aren't willing to self-censor. Now, there are other American companies that are there and do self-censor, but anyway, here's the question for you. Why, if they won't allow us to have freedom of the press in their country, do we allow them to have freedom of press in our country? Now, the First Amendment is critical. It's critical to any democracy. You can't have a democracy without it. Dictatorships, of course, don't like it. But if we're going to be muzzled in what we can say in their country, why don't we muzzle what they can say in ours? Their diplomats and others who are both in China and abroad in the United States use Twitter and Facebook to promote Chinese interests and to put down the United States. I don't see why we allow this. And the Wall Street Journal and another newspaper recently published some articles about China that were published in America. And China didn't like them, so they kicked out the reporters from those countries. Well, this obviously is not equal. So I'm a big supporter of the First Amendment. Everybody knows we've got to have freedom of press. But shouldn't it just be for people who share those views? So if you're from Sweden, just as an example, and you live in a democracy where you have freedom of the press, and someone from Sweden wants to say something negative about America in the American press, fine, no problem, or from any other country. But if the Chinese don't let us to say things in their country on their press, why do we allow them in ours? I think we should have a law that says only if you let us have the right to freedom of press in your country will you have the right to freedom of press in our country. I'm not trying to limit it on any Americans or anyone from any democracy, so I don't think this in any way interferes with the First Amendment. But let's be fair about things. Why do we give Chinese these advantages over us? And that's just one example of the advantages we give them. So let's talk about a few other things that maybe affect us even a little bit more than these journalistic type things. They're trying to control the world economically and militarily. Some people still don't believe that, but I think everybody's going to believe it more and more. One of the things they're doing is this Belt and Road Initiative, and I have to give the Chinese credit. They're very clever. They're very smart in what they do. So they go to places, countries in Middle East, Africa, etc. Excuse me, and they say, hey, you got a beautiful bay here. It's a deep water. It'd make a fabulous port. Why don't we build one for you? Here's what we'll do. We'll loan you the money to build it. And these countries are like, wow, it would help us a lot economically if we had this port. So, okay. So the Chinese come in, they say, well, here, this is going to cost you, $1 billion, whatever the amount is, and you pay it back over 20 years. Well, the countries, in many cases, just will not be able to pay this money back. They may even know that, but they're so desperate for development funds that they do these things. And the Chinese come in and say, oh, and it's our construction company that'll build this, and we need, 85% of the laborers on this to be Chinese. So what is the host country really getting as a benefit? Very little. And they're doing this with power plants and all sorts of facilities. So what we see down the road, what's coming, and we warned these countries about it, these third world countries, but they don't listen. And that is, when you default on this debt, China's going to take it over. So what will happen? China will have bases of ports all around Africa and the Middle East and maybe some other places because they've taken them over because you couldn't service the debt. And power plants and other things that will hold you hostage to them. This is a very dangerous thing and will let them exert their power all across the world as their military continues to grow and their navy improves. This is something we should be very worried about. Now, for some people that's a little extemporaneous and it's the outside world and they don't worry about it. Well, they should, because we're a very interconnected world. But nevertheless, let's talk about things that do affect America a little more directly. And that is trade with China. We are China's #1 trade partner. They're our #1 trade partner. Huge amounts. Europe is a distant second to us as a trade partner. Maybe not distant, but secondary. So this would be maybe okay if we were dealing with countries that treated us correctly, but they don't. And the balance of trade is such that we import far more from China than we export to them. And that's dangerous for a lot of reasons. One of the things we're finding out with this coronavirus stuff is a lot of medical supplies and pharmaceuticals are manufactured in China and not in the United States. That means we're at hostage for these kind of things if they want to hold us hostage. And they have a lot of electronic manufacturing, computers, video cameras, whatever. A lot of this stuff comes from China. And we need to really think about this. We're giving them the rope to hang us if they want to use it. And at some point, as they become stronger and stronger, they will do that. And so we've really got to take a second look at trade. Earlier or a couple years back, I guess when Trump first came in, he put some tariffs on Chinese goods. I view this as a very good thing. He used it to negotiate balance of trade, which is good, but I think we need to do it for just general reasons to stop so much trade coming from them. It'd be one thing if it were even, but it's not anywhere near even, and even if it isn't, we can't allow them to manufacture so much of our pharmaceuticals and computer gear and things that are critical to us. So if we put a 100% tariff on anything coming from China, what's going to happen? Well, the manufacturing will have to move to other countries. Now, we want the manufacturing to move to America, but we have to be realistic. The cost of labor in other countries is so much lower that it's not all going to move here. Only a fraction of it will. We'll take what we can get. But whether it's India or Malaysia or wherever that these products would now be sourced for us, that's much better. They're not going to use this against us. We need to look into this very closely. The other thing is China doesn't just have a lower cost of labor. So if it's not just labor, why are they able to produce so much for us? Well, they're a lot bigger country in terms of population, and so they have more ability to produce more things with labor. But what I'm getting towards here is their theft of proprietary technology. So how do they get this technology? Well, let's step back for a second and go, who's got the research facilities? Who's got the laboratories? Who comes up with these products? One good way to explain that is take a look at Nobel Prizes. And America has the most Nobel Prizes of any country, 385. That's not a big surprise to anybody, but just keep that number in mind. The second highest is England with 132. So we're almost 3 times as many Nobel Prizes as anybody else. How many does China have? 8. And of those 8, 3 of them are for things like literature. Only 5 of them are in the hard sciences. So we have a huge advantage in terms of research, development, scientific discovery. That's America. So how does China end up with all these technologies? They steal them. And we know it, and we're lax about it, and we let them do it. One way is through internet theft, and so companies need to be a lot better about guarding their secrets. But the second way is through spying. China has an awful lot of people that they send here, both graduate students, well, undergraduate, but graduate students and professors that they put in place at research universities. And from there, they spy, steal these secrets from research universities, and send it back to China. Why do we let them do this? Why don't we just say, here are a couple of fields, and I'll just say chemistry and physics, maybe biology too. But anyway, that we won't let you have Chinese nationals in these positions. Can't do it. You can, now, if you want to study medicine or some other fields, great, and we'll be glad to have you. But in these certain fields that are national security, you can't be there. We're tired of you stealing our secrets. We can't give them the rope to hang ourselves. We keep doing it. We don't play on a level playing field. They cheat. And if they can't get their own people into these positions, then they come and bribe Americans to spy for them and steal these secrets and give them to them. Obviously, that's bad on America, but regardless, we're not playing on a level playing field, and we need to. We need to change the rules for how we work with China, because they don't play by our rules. And it's going to get worse. So what can we do? We can talk to our legislators about making these changes. But there's one other thing we can do, and that is stop buying Chinese goods. If something is made in China, don't buy it. So if I go out to Target and I'm picking up a vacuum cleaner or whatever, I look at it and I see where it's made, because we have regulations that say in America, if something like, this isn't right, but something like more than 50% of the content comes from a particular country, it has to be labeled saying it comes from that country. So if I go to Target and I pick up a vacuum cleaner, I see it's made in China, I say, nope, not that one. I pick up this one, maybe it's not made in America, maybe it's made in the Philippines, but I take that instead, because that is far better for us. Well, we need to do that, but now, think about purchasing on Amazon or any online seller. You don't know where it's made, do you? It doesn't tell you where it's made. When you get it on your doorstep, you pick it up, you look at it and go, oh, this was made in China. We need regulations that say any online seller needs to advertise in the product description where that product is made. That's the only way you'll have a choice to say, oh no, I won't buy a Chinese product. Because we buy so much online. It's not just during this period of the virus, it's all the time. We buy so much online, we've got to stop buying from China. But you can't do that if you don't know where the product is made. We need the sellers to tell us where it's made. I think that 20 years from now, we're going to look back and say the Chinese problem was like global warming. We didn't realize it on a mass scale until it was too late. We're almost too late for global warming. We're not doing enough. That's another matter, but it's an example of the same thing with the Chinese. We're close to the point where it's going to be too late to do anything. We need to do something now. We can do so much through our governments. We need you to act. We need you to stop buying Chinese goods. We're giving them the rope to hang ourselves. I need you to not only subscribe to this channel and like this video, I need you to post links on Facebook Twitter, whatever, to this video, or stand up yourself and tell people, I'm not going to let China bully us around anymore. I'm going to stop buying Chinese goods. We need to do this. We need to do it now. It's the only way to get any leverage over them, and the only way to get them to act the way that a responsible nation does. Obviously, this means a lot to me. I think it should mean a lot to you. Don't wait until it's too late. All right? Thank you. Post your comments, like us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Have a great week.